The autumn wind rustled through the trees outside the window of Miller and Associates investment firm as I reviewed the quarterly reports. At 32, I had built a successful career as a senior financial advisor, though my family never seemed to notice or care. The notification sound from my phone broke my concentration. Another message from my mother about my younger brother Daniel's upcoming wedding. Sarah, don't forget the family dinner tonight. Important wedding discussions. Be there by 7. I sighed and put down my pen. At 27, Daniel had never held a steady job, bouncing between startup ideas and entrepreneurial ventures that inevitably failed. But he was the golden child, the charming son who could do no wrong. And now he was marrying Jessica, a social media influencer with expensive taste and even bigger dreams. The family dynamic was always clear. Daniel was the star, and I was the responsible one. The quiet achiever who would understand, who would help, who would give. Looking at my watch, I realized it was already 6:30. Gathering my things, I headed out to my modest Honda Civic. I could have afforded better, but I believed in living below my means and saving for the future. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 20 minutes. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Daniel's new BMW parked out front, another investment in his personal brand, as he called it. Inside, the house was warm and filled with the smell of Mom's lasagna. Jessica's voice carried from the living room, discussing wedding venues and flower arrangements. Sarah, finally. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Everyone's waiting. I followed her to the dining room, where Dad sat at the head of the table, Daniel and Jessica to his right. Jessica was showing everyone something on her iPad, probably more wedding inspiration photos. "Hey, sis," Daniel grinned. "You're just in time for the big news." I took my usual seat across from them, noting how Jessica barely acknowledged my presence. Mom brought out the lasagna, and we began serving ourselves. "So," Dad cleared his throat, "we've been discussing the wedding plans, and there have been some developments." Something in his tone made me pause, my fork halfway to my mouth. "The thing is," Mom jumped in, "Daniel and Jessica found the perfect venue. The Grand Plaza Hotel downtown. It's absolutely beautiful. And exclusive," Jessica added, scrolling through photos on her iPad. "They only do a few weddings each year. We were so lucky to get a date." I nodded politely, wondering why this required my presence at dinner. Then Dad dropped the bomb. The deposit was due immediately to hold the date, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "And with the current market situation, our investments aren't as liquid as we'd like." My stomach tightened. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. "Sarah," Mom said softly, reaching for my hand, "we know you've always been good with money. So responsible, always saving." "We used your savings account," Dad interrupted. "The joint one you opened with me when you were 18. We needed the money for the deposit and initial vendors." The room spun slightly. That account had over $80,000, my savings from 15 years of careful budgeting, overtime, and bonuses. "You? What?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Don't be dramatic," Jessica said, rolling her eyes. "It's just money, and it's for family." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking slightly, and checked my banking app. The account balance read $1,000. They'd taken everything except the minimum balance to keep the account open. "We left you something," Mom said brightly, as if that made it better. "And really, when would you need that much money anyway?" You're not even dating anyone. Actually, I started, but Daniel cut me off. Sis, you know this is important to us. The plaza is perfect, and Jessica deserves her dream wedding. You don't need a big wedding anyway. You're already 32. I sat there, fork suspended in midair, as my family continued discussing flower arrangements and menu options, as if they hadn't just stolen my life savings, as if they hadn't just violated my trust in the most fundamental way. What they didn't know was that I had been dating James Thompson for the past year. We kept it quiet because he was a private person, and frankly, I'd wanted something in my life that was just mine, away from my family's judgment and demands. James was a marine biologist turned successful entrepreneur. He developed an innovative ocean cleanup technology and turned it into a multi-million-dollar environmental company. We'd met at a charity gala where I was representing my firm, and he'd spilled his drink on my dress while trying to avoid an overeager investor. We were planning to announce our engagement next month. He'd already proposed on his small private island in the Caribbean where he conducted marine research. The ring sat hidden in my apartment, along with our plans for an intimate destination wedding on that very island. But sitting at that dinner table, watching my family casually discuss how they'd stolen my savings, something shifted inside me. Years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who would understand, it all crystallized into a cold, hard clarity. The wedding is in 3 months, Mom was saying. We'll need you to help with the planning, of course, and maybe you could contribute to the honeymoon fund. No. The word came out quiet but firm. What? Dad looked up from his plate. I said no. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You stole from me. You took my savings without asking, without even telling me first. Don't be so selfish, Jessica snapped. It's for your brother's wedding. Honey, Mom started. We know it's a lot to process, but family helps family, and it's not like you need the money right now. I laughed then, a short, sharp sound that made them all stare. You know what? You're right. I don't need that money right now. Keep it. Consider it my wedding gift to Daniel and Jessica. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Sarah, don't be dramatic, Dad called after me. Come back and finish dinner. We can discuss this like adults. I turned back one last time. There's nothing to discuss. You've made your choice. Now I'll make mine. As I drove home, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my family. I ignored them all. Instead, I called James. Hey, beautiful, his warm voice answered. How was dinner? They took my savings, I said without preamble. $80,000 for my brother's wedding. There was a long pause. They did what? I explained everything as I drove, his silence growing heavier with each detail. Sarah, he said finally, move in with me tonight. We'll announce our engagement tomorrow. And as for your savings, he paused. I think it's time to show your family exactly what they've underestimated. That night, I packed essentials from my apartment and drove to James's penthouse. As I lay in bed later, his arm around me, I thought about all the times I'd diminished myself to keep peace in my family. All the times I'd stayed quiet, been responsible, played my assigned role. The next morning, I walked into my office and requested a transfer to our Miami branch, where I'd be closer to James's Marine Research Center. My boss, impressed by my work over the years, approved it immediately, with a substantial raise. Then I called my lawyer. I need you to do 2 things, I said. First, I want to formally separate all my financial ties from my family. Close joint accounts. Remove my name from any shared assets. Second, I need you to draw up a prenuptial agreement that specifically excludes my future inheritance from my marriage assets. Planning ahead, he asked. No, I replied, thinking of the inheritance my parents always dangled as a reason for compliance. Making a point. Over the next week, I methodically disentangled my life from my family's influence. They called constantly, alternating between anger, guilt, and attempts at manipulation. I let everything go to voicemail. Finally, after 10 days of silence, I sent a group text. Check your mail tomorrow. The wedding invitations were works of art, handmade paper, silver embossing, and a small preserved starfish attached to each one. The location: Paradise Cove, Private Island, Caribbean Sea. The date: 1 month before Daniel's wedding. I included a personal note. As you said, I don't need a big wedding. I just need the right one. Unfortunately, due to recent financial adjustments, I won't be able to attend Daniel and Jessica's celebration. I'm sure you understand. Family helps family, after all. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages and calls. I turned it off and looked at James, who was watching me with a mixture of pride and concern. Ready for phase 2? He asked. I nodded, thinking of the press release scheduled for tomorrow announcing our engagement and my position as Chief Financial Officer of his expanding environmental technology company. They wanted me to be small, I said. They never imagined I could build something bigger than they could take. James kissed my forehead. Show them who you really are, Sarah, and then let them live with what they lost. The next day, as I prepared for the press conference, I received one last text from my mother. Please, we can fix this. Tell us what you want. I replied with a screenshot of my emptied savings account and wrote, I wanted a family who saw me as more than an ATM. Looks like we both ended up disappointed. Then I walked onto the stage, took James's hand, and began writing a new chapter. One where I wasn't the responsible daughter or the reliable sister, but simply Sarah Thompson, a woman who finally decided to stand up for herself. And somewhere in the Caribbean, a private island waited, ready to host a wedding that would show my family exactly what they'd thrown away when they decided to take what was mine. The Miami morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our beachfront penthouse as I reviewed the final wedding preparations. 2 weeks had passed since the invitations went out, and the responses had been exactly as dramatic as I'd expected. My phone buzzed with another message from Jessica. You're trying to overshadow our wedding. This is so typical of you, Sarah. Always having to prove something. I archived it without responding, adding it to the collection of increasingly desperate messages from my family. Dad had called 17 times, each voicemail more demanding than the last. Mom alternated between tearful pleas and guilt trips. Daniel mostly sent angry texts about family loyalty and my selfish attention-seeking. More family drama? James asked, setting a cup of coffee beside me. The usual. I opened Jessica's message. Apparently, I'm trying to overshadow their wedding by having mine first. He sat down beside me, his expression thoughtful. You know, we could postpone if you want to keep the peace. I shook my head firmly. No. They took my savings without asking, without even telling me first. They don't get to dictate my life anymore. Just then, my phone rang. Aunt Marie, my father's sister, and the only family member who'd ever really seen through the dynamic. Sarah, she said when I answered, I got your invitation, and I heard what they did with your savings. I braced myself for more criticism, but her next words surprised me. It's about time you stood up to them. Your grandmother would be proud. My throat tightened. Grandma Elizabeth had passed away 5 years ago, leaving me her vintage jewelry collection, pieces Mom had always assumed would go to Daniel's future wife. Thanks, Aunt Marie. That means a lot. I have something for you, she continued. Something your grandmother wanted you to have when you got married. Can I come see you? 2 hours later, Aunt Marie sat in our living room, a worn leather portfolio in her lap. Your grandmother knew how they treated you, she said, opening the portfolio. She saw how they took advantage of your responsibility, your kindness. So she left me these, with instructions to give them to you when the time was right. Inside were stock certificates, hundreds of them. My hands trembled as I read the company names. These are shares in Dad's company, I whispered. And the family real estate holdings. Aunt Marie nodded. 30% ownership, transferred to a trust in your name before she died. Your parents don't know. Elizabeth wanted you to have leverage when you finally decided to stand up for yourself. I stared at the certificates, understanding blooming. With these shares, I had significant voting power in the family business decisions. There's more, Aunt Marie added, pulling out an envelope. A letter she wrote for you. The paper was yellowed, Grandma's elegant handwriting filling the page. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, you've finally found your voice. I've watched them diminish you, take advantage of your generous heart, all while praising Daniel's reckless behavior. They mistake your kindness for weakness, your responsibility for submission. These shares are your power, but they're also a test. Use them wisely, not for revenge, but for change. Show them the leader you are, the woman I always saw in you. Remember, sometimes the biggest act of love is standing up to those who take love for granted. All my love, Grandma Elizabeth. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I finished reading. James, who had been quietly listening, squeezed my hand. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Aunt Marie said softly. She knew this day would come. After she left, I sat with James, discussing what this meant. You now have significant influence in their business decisions, he noted, including any financial moves they might make for Daniel's wedding. I looked at the stock certificates, thinking. They used my savings for his deposit. I wonder how they're planning to pay for the rest. A quick call to my lawyer confirmed my suspicions. Dad had scheduled a board meeting to approve selling company assets to fund the wedding. Perfect timing, James smiled. The board meeting is next week. Ready to show them who you've become. The day of the board meeting dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a tailored white suit. Grandma's sapphire pendant at my throat. James insisted on driving me, concerned about my nerves. Remember, he said as we pulled up to the company headquarters, you're not that little girl anymore. You're Sarah Thompson, CFO of Ocean Revival Tech, and a major shareholder in your own right. The boardroom fell silent as I walked in. Dad stood at the head of the table, papers frozen in his hands. Sarah, what are you doing here? I smiled, taking a seat. Attending the board meeting, of course. As a major shareholder, I have that right. Shareholder? Mom's voice came from the doorway, where she stood with Daniel. What is she talking about, Robert? I pulled out the stock certificates. Grandma Elizabeth's wedding gift. 30% ownership, which means I looked directly at Dad. I have significant say in any asset sales or financial decisions. The color drained from Dad's face. Daniel stepped forward, his expression thunderous. You can't do this. The plaza deposit is paid. We need to sell these properties for the rest of the wedding expenses. Actually, I said calmly. I can. And I vote no on selling any assets for a wedding. In fact, I pulled out another document. I moved to implement new policies on asset management and financial responsibility. The next hour was chaos. Dad tried to challenge the stock transfer's legitimacy. Mom cried about family loyalty. Daniel threatened legal action. But the certificates were ironclad, the transfer legal and binding. By the end of the meeting, my proposals had passed. No asset sales without full board approval, mandatory financial responsibility training for all family members involved in the business, and a clear separation between personal and company expenses. As the board members filed out, many nodding respectfully in my direction, Dad approached my chair. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "We're your family." I stood, meeting his eyes. "Yes, you are. And family shouldn't steal from family, shouldn't diminish each other, shouldn't take love for granted. Is this about the savings account? We can pay you back." "No, Dad. This is about respect, about boundaries, about finally showing you who I really am." I walked to the door, then turned back. "Oh, and about Daniel's wedding? He has two choices. Scale back to what he can actually afford, or learn to live with disappointment. Consider it a lesson in financial responsibility." Mom tried to follow me out, but I held up a hand. "Save your guilt trips. I've already heard them all. Instead, try asking yourself why you never defended me the way you defend him." Outside, James waited in the car. "How did it go?" I let out a long breath, exactly as it needed to. They finally saw me. "And how does it feel?" I thought about Grandma's letter, about years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who would understand. It feels like freedom. That evening, as we finalized plans for our island wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "You've ruined everything. I hope you're happy." I showed it to James, who raised an eyebrow. "Are you happy?" I looked around our home, at the wedding plans spread across the table, at the life we were building together, at the woman I'd become when I finally decided to stand up for myself. "Yes," I replied, both to James and to Daniel's text. "For the first time in my life, I truly am." 2 weeks before my island wedding, the impact of my boardroom appearance rippled through the family like aftershocks from an earthquake. Daniel and Jessica were forced to drastically downsize their wedding plans, moving from the Grand Plaza to a local country club. The fallout was spectacular. I sat in my Miami office, reviewing an email from the family's company accountant. He had discovered several unauthorized loans Daniel had taken from the business over the years, quietly covered up by Dad. The total was staggering, over $300,000. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. My assistant entered with a concerned expression. "Ms. Miller, your mother is here." I hadn't seen Mom since the board meeting. "Send her in." She entered hesitantly, looking out of place in my sleek corporate office. Her eyes took in the view of the Miami skyline, the awards on my wall, the fresh flowers James sent every Monday. "This is impressive," she said, settling into a chair. "We had no idea." "You never asked," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "What brings you here, Mom?" She twisted her hands in her lap. "Daniel's wedding is falling apart. Jessica's family is threatening to call it off if they can't have the plaza. He's devastated. And this concerns me, Hal." "Sarah, please. We're trying to understand. You have this beautiful life, this successful career. Why can't you help your brother?" I leaned back in my chair, studying the woman who had always put Daniel's needs before mine. Let me tell you a story, Mom. When I was 16, I won a full scholarship to an elite summer business program. Do you remember what happened? She shifted uncomfortably. Daniel wanted to go to soccer camp that same summer. You and Dad used my college fund, money I had saved from every birthday and every summer job, to pay for it. You said I didn't need the program since I already had good grades. That was different. Was it? Or was it the same pattern we followed my entire life? Daniel wants, Daniel gets. Sarah understands, Sarah gets. We always knew you were stronger, she protested. More capable. No, I cut her off. You made me responsible because it was convenient. You praised my reliability because it served you, but you never respected it. I pulled out the folder containing the loan documents. Did you know about these? The money Daniel took from the company. Her face paled. Your father handled the business side. $300,000, Mom, on top of the savings you took from me. When does it end? She started crying. Soft, manipulative tears I'd seen so many times before. We just wanted him to be happy. And what about my happiness? I stood, walking to the window. Did you ever consider that? Of course we did. You were always so independent. Independent by necessity, not choice. I turned back to her. The island wedding you're all so angry about. It's not about showing off. It's about finally doing something for myself, without considering everyone else's feelings first. But the timing was perfect. I sat back down. It showed me exactly who you all are. When I needed you, when my savings were stolen, none of you stood up for me. But when I stood up for myself, suddenly I'm the villain. Mom wiped her eyes, finally seeming to really see me. What do you want, Sarah? I want you to go home and tell Daniel he needs to live within his means. Tell Dad the company cover-up stopped now. And tell yourself your daughter deserves better than being everyone's safety net. After she left, I called James. My mother just visited, I said when he answered. Are you okay? Better than okay. I think I finally said everything I've been holding back for years. That evening, we hosted dinner for our wedding planner and Aunt Marie at our penthouse. As we reviewed the final details, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. This is all your fault. Daniel hasn't smiled in days. Hope you're proud of destroying your family. I showed it to Aunt Marie, who snorted. That girl needs a reality check. Speaking of which, she pulled out an envelope. More documents from your grandmother. Inside was a detailed accounting of every financial sacrifice I'd made for the family over the years. Grandma had kept meticulous records. Elizabeth knew this day would come, Aunt Marie explained. She wanted proof of your contributions when they tried to paint you as the selfish one. The wedding planner, Lisa, whistled at the total. They took all this from you. And still expected more, James added, his arm around my shoulders. Well, Lisa smiled. Wait until they see what they're missing. The island looks magical. The flowers arrived yesterday, and the setup team starts tomorrow. I thought about my family's reaction to the invitation. Only Aunt Marie and 2 cousins had RSVP'd yes. The rest declined, with varying degrees of hostility. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find Daniel waiting. We need to talk, he said, following me inside. About? Jessica's family wants their deposit back. They say a country club wedding isn't good enough. He ran his hands through his hair. I need your help, sis. No. What? I said no. Figure it out yourself. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. But you're my sister. Yes, and you stood silent while they took my savings, while they dismissed my feelings, while they treated me like an ATM, not a family member. That's not fair. I was going to pay you back. I pulled out Grandma's records. Really? Like you paid back the $300,000 you took from the company. His face went white. How did you? I'm a major shareholder now, remember? I see everything. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to start paying back those loans with interest. You're going to have the wedding you can afford. And you're going to stop expecting me to fix your problems. Or what? Or I call for a full audit of the company's books. Every loan, every cover-up, everything. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. That night, as James and I packed for our trip to the island, I received an email from Dad. Sarah, your mother told me about your conversation. I spent the night reviewing the company books, seeing the pattern we created. I'm not proud of what I found. You were right about Daniel, about all of it. We enabled him at your expense, took advantage of your strength, rather than celebrating it. I'm sorry. I know it's probably too late. But if the invitation still stands, your mother and I would like to come to your wedding. Dad, I showed it to James, who'll read it carefully. What do you think? He asked. I thought about Grandma's letter, about using power for change, not revenge. I think, I said slowly, that sometimes the biggest change starts with the smallest step. I replied to Dad's email. The invitation stands, but things will be different now. No more taking advantage, no more dismissing my feelings, no more expecting me to sacrifice myself for Daniel's benefit. If you can accept that, there's a place for you at my wedding. Sarah. 3 days later, we landed on the island. The setup was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. White flowers cascaded over natural archways, lights twinkled in the palm trees, and the ocean provided the perfect backdrop. As I stood on the beach watching the sunset, James wrapped his arms around me. Having any regrets? I thought about the past months, standing up to my family, reclaiming my power, building a life on my terms. Just one, I smiled, that I didn't do this sooner. Well, he kissed my temple. Better late than never. Tomorrow, my parents would arrive, hopefully ready to see me as I truly am. Daniel and Jessica had declined to come, still angry about their downsized wedding. But standing there, in James's arms, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors, I realized something important. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. And sometimes standing up for yourself is the greatest act of self-love you can show. The morning of my wedding dawned with perfect Caribbean clarity. From the villa's master suite, I watched the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and rose. My wedding dress, a simple but elegant design that cost far less than Jessica's would have, hung by the window, catching the early light. Mom and Dad had arrived yesterday, subdued and almost hesitant. The dynamic had shifted noticeably. Gone were the demands and guilt trips, replaced by careful conversation and tentative attempts to understand. You look different here, Mom had said during dinner. More yourself. I am myself, I'd replied. Maybe for the first time. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Aunt Marie entered, carrying a familiar jewelry box. One last gift from Elizabeth, she said, opening it to reveal Grandma's sapphire earrings. Something blue, something borrowed, though she always meant them to be yours. As she helped me put them on, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Hope you're happy with your perfect island wedding while mine is ruined. I deleted it without responding. Today wasn't about old wounds or family drama. It was about new beginnings. The ceremony was set for sunset. Throughout the day, guests arrived. James's family, our friends, my colleagues, and the few family members who had chosen to support us. The island staff moved efficiently, transforming the beach into a magical setting. An hour before the ceremony, Dad knocked on my door. "Sarah," he said, looking uncomfortable in his linen suit. "Can we talk?" I nodded, and he entered, taking in my appearance with misty eyes. "You look beautiful," he said softly, "and successful. Happy." He paused. "We were wrong about so many things." "Yes, you were. Seeing you here, in this life you've built, I realized we never really saw you before. We saw what we needed you to be." I touched Grandma's earrings, and now I see my daughter, strong, capable, and far wiser than her father. He pulled out an envelope. "We've made changes at the company. Real ones. Daniel's loans are being formally documented and repayment is being structured. No more cover-ups." I smiled, recognizing this as the apology it was meant to be. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed. As James and I exchanged vows under the setting sun, with waves lapping gently at the shore, I felt complete. Not because I needed this wedding to prove anything, but because I'd chosen it for myself. During the reception, Mom approached me on the dance floor. "I've been thinking about what you said in your office," she began, "about making you responsible because it was convenient. You were right." I waited, letting her continue. "We took your strength for granted, expected you to always understand, always give. I'm sorry we didn't protect you the way we protected Daniel." "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." Later that night, as James and I danced under the stars, he asked, "Any regrets about not having the big family wedding they wanted for Daniel?" I looked around at our intimate gathering, at the people who had chosen to celebrate our love rather than judge our choices. "No," I smiled. "This is exactly the wedding I wanted. One that represents who I am, not who they needed me to be." My phone had one final message that night from Daniel. "Dad says no more company money for my wedding. This is your fault." I showed it to James, who raised an eyebrow. "Want to respond?" "No need," I replied, turning off my phone. "He'll either learn to stand on his own feet or he won't. Not my responsibility anymore." As we left the reception, walking barefoot on the beach under a canopy of stars, I thought about Grandma's letter. She had been right. Sometimes the biggest act of love is standing up to those who take love for granted. I had done more than just stand up. I had reclaimed my life, my worth, and my voice. The family dynamic had shifted, perhaps permanently, but that was okay. Sometimes broken patterns need to stay broken for new, healthier ones to form. James squeezed my hand. "Ready for our next chapter?" I looked at him, at the life we were building together, at the strength I'd found in standing up for myself. "More than ready," I smiled. "It's time for a new story, one where I'm the author, not just a supporting character." And under the Caribbean stars, with the sound of waves providing nature's perfect soundtrack, I stepped fully into my own narrative, not as the responsible daughter or the reliable sister, but as Sarah Thompson, a woman who had finally learned that true family supports your growth rather than stunting it for their convenience.